What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharyson, the editor-in-chief of NumberFire.com, and I am here to show you some awesome new tools that we've developed for this fantasy football season. As you can see, we're on this DFS helper screen, which shows you all the different things that you can choose from our tool suite. We have a lineup generator, a heat map, some projections, some advanced stats, trends, and so on. So let's just take a look at some of these and walk through them. We can just build a really quick lineup so I can show you how you can dominate your daily fantasy league. So let's look at the heat map first. So the heat map is very similar to some other things that you might have seen that we've built at NumberFire, because we've used this heat map for other sports as well. We just didn't have it for football last season. But as you can see, it's just a basic. It's a map of what Vegas is thinking is going to happen in particular games. So right now is week 1. So you see Indianapolis, they're playing Detroit. The spread is -5. The over-under at 49. That's a pretty high over-under, which is why it's fairly green. You can click the over-under and you can see at the highest one is the Steelers against the Redskins. And based on the spread, you have an implied team total for the Steelers of 26.75. And then over here on the right is everything net expected points related. So if you don't know what net expected points is, you can go to our homepage, go to the bottom in the footer. You can check out our glossary. It explains net expected points, but it's our way of showing which teams are good and which teams aren't based on these expected point values. So as you can see, the Steelers, as I said, they have a high over-under for week 1. On the other side of the spectrum, you have the Bengals and the Jets having a low one. But really what you want to look at is something like implied team total, because these are offenses you want to target. So the Colts, for instance, in week 1 have a very high implied team total. On the opposite side of the spectrum is Miami. So let's just pretend that you don't want to play Miami, anyone from Miami against the Seahawks defense, because who would want to play guys against a defense like Seattle at Seattle? We know how strong that defense can be at home. I'm going to go ahead and say, no, I don't want the Miami Dolphins in my lineup. And then over here, you can see excluded teams. Miami's no longer going to be part of your optimal lineup when you were to go to generate that lineup. So we'll go through some of these and we'll generate a lineup at the end just to kind of show you how it all works. So that's the heat map. You can look at advanced stats, which will show you a lot of different things, really. This is really just looking at how the game script looks. So game script, obviously, it'll be good if the implied or if the spread is favorable. If you're a favorite, a positive game script is good for quarterbacks. But you can also look at things like game splits. So with game splits, you have home and away splits for a particular quarterback or player. So Aaron Rodgers, for instance, fantasy points per game at home, you get 20.51 points. Fantasy points per game away, you have 18.15 points. You can look at how they perform as a favorite or an underdog in the split. So obviously this is bolded because he is away. He's playing at Jacksonville, so he has an 18.15 fantasy points per game average on the road. And then as a favorite, so as a road favorite, essentially, you get a 20.09 points per game. So he's very good as a favorite. So those are the kind of things you want to look at whenever you're building your lineups. So let's go to the trends page. This is probably the coolest thing that we added from a tool standpoint. One of the really big things that goes overlooked is market share. So everyone looks at raw target numbers, raw carry numbers, and they think that those things are while they do tell you a story, what's more important is to see what percentage of those targets these players are getting. So if we look at Sammy Watkins, for instance, this is based on last season, I believe. His last 3 target market share was 42.47%, which is absolutely insane. And so you can see the change. This is his overall percentage of targets that he's seen throughout the season versus his last 3, and you can see the change or the delta in that. So Sammy Watkins is on the favorable side of the spectrum. On the unfavorable side of the spectrum, you can just simply sort, and you get Larry Fitzgerald, who's at minus 9.70. And you can also change this to show the last 5 games or just the last game in general. You can go to the running back position and show the same type of thing. Obviously, with running backs, you're sort of concerned with targets, but you're more concerned with just general carries. And this is especially true, so we'll have carries listed first because they're more important. But this is especially true if you look at things like in the red zone. So this is one of the cooler things that we definitely added, where you can look at total market share, but obviously fantasy football and daily fantasy is very much driven through what happens in the red zone and scoring touchdowns. So you can see the last 3 games from a running back perspective. how many red zone carries they were getting per game, how many total carries they've gotten throughout the season, the percentage of carries that he's gotten versus the rest of the team, and so on. So, and you can look at red zone targets as well, which is obviously going to help, especially at the wide receiver position if you want to get that dominant receiver who's just hoarding those red zone targets. So that's what you can see. You can see the total market share. You can see the red zone market shares. And then you can see the hottest and coldest players, which is cool. And then also just general receiving, rushing, and passing stats that you can use when you're trying to optimize and build a great lineup for DFS in that given week. So here's an example for receiving stats at the running back position. Let's change it to wide receiver just because obviously wide receivers are more important when it comes to receiving, and you'd want to look at that more. So you can see you have the number of targets over the last 3 per game. So Antonio Brown had 15.3 versus his 12.1 season-long total, which means over the last 3 games, he's seeing 3.3 more targets per game. So they're using him more over the last 3 games than usual. Then you just have simple yardage statistics, touchdown statistics, point of catch yards. So this is basically saying how many yards did this guy have when he caught the ball, and it's not factoring in things like yards after the catch. And that's really, really important because obviously yards after the catch can be skewed. You want guys, you're going to be able to see which guys are catching passes further down the field versus guys who are staying closer to the line of scrimmage, like someone like Golden Tate. So it's really cool to look at. You can look at the receptions. Obviously there's, everyone knows what receptions are. And then there's some fantasy point totals in there as well. So if there were guys that you liked, let's say that we wanted to lock in Antonio Brown into our lineup. We say, yes, we like that he's seen more targets over the last 3 games. Obviously, it's Antonio Brown, so he's a monster regardless. We already saw Sammy Watkins seeing a higher target market share. We can lock him in. So this is obviously just a dummy lineup. But overall, so over here, you see that the locked players are Antonio Brown and Sammy Watkins. And again, we want to exclude the Miami Dolphins. We're going to play on FanDuel. You can choose what type of game that you want to play when you optimize this lineup. So again, we're going to have Antonio Brown, we're going to have Sammy Watkins, and we're not going to have any Miami Dolphins. But in a cash game, we're going to try to skew towards a higher floor, whereas in tournaments, we're going to skew towards a higher ceiling. We're going to get guys of massive variance. We'll keep the start times as all. And you can choose also if you want a quarterback receiver stack. So if I were to choose which team, then obviously it'll force that team in. But obviously, since I already have Antonio Brown in here, I have Sammy Watkins in here. Let's just pretend that we wanted to use Buffalo in there because Sammy Watkins is on Buffalo. We can get that Tyrod Taylor, Sammy Watkins thing going on. And then we can generate that lineup. And while we wait for this to generate, you should see Antonio Brown, Sammy Watkins, hopefully Tyrod Taylor. So we have Tyrod Taylor in here, Sammy Watkins, Antonio Brown, Julio Jones is just a pick that our algorithm liked. D'Angelo Williams, Travis Kelce, Charles Sims, Nick Novak, and the Green Bay defense. So basically you can go through, look at all these tools, look at the trends, look at the advanced stats, use the heat map, and you can just select and deselect people that you want to lock into your lineup and exclude in your lineup. And then if there's anything left over, our numbers will crunch and our lineup generator will make a lineup for you to fill those gaps. So that's it for the most part of what this new tool has. There's definitely some other things that if you sign up and you can use the tool that you'll find, but hopefully it's going to help you this season win some cash in daily fantasy football.